All right, so I'm going to open the public comment period, and I know that we have Anna Seidek who wanted to speak to us tonight during that. So take it away, Anna.
Great. Thank you, Martha. Thank you to this committee. I just wanted to offer up a couple previews and a request on behalf of the Hamilton-Wenham Human Rights Coalition, for which I serve as the board president. We have a few things on our agenda that we're working through, and they would benefit from town support, not financial support, but either logistical considerations or help with planning. So I'm working on an email within our board to sort of vet it and make sure it sounds right for us, and was going to send that to Martha, but I wanted to sort of come to you tonight to let you know it was coming, and maybe request in your next agenda, could I have maybe 5 or 10 minutes to present some of the stuff that we're thinking on that would be good partnership opportunities for the Town of Wenham Human Rights Commission. And you guys can decide if that's something you want to participate in or not. That's all.
So we don't get an actual preview?
Well, I will tell you, we're thinking about, the rough story, we're thinking about a forum in partnership with the local police departments in and around community policing and the sort of power of symbols and iconography. So that's one thing that we're sort of working on. Another one is some events around Pride programming for the month of June is something on our mind. We also have high hopes to have a large community-wide Juneteenth celebration, which happens to fall on a Saturday. So we're sort of cautiously optimistic the pandemic might break and we might be able to do something. So those are some of the things on our mind that would sort of benefit from public partnership and collaboration. So there's that. We've also submitted a cultural council grant to procure many Pride flags, and we'd like to request formal use of the poles along 1A that often get used for American flags for Memorial Day or 4th of July. June is a perfect little interlude in there. So we're wondering if we could use the poles for Pride flags. And then of course, a formal request for Pride flag raising and lighting at the town hall in rainbow colors. Tom, you have a big set of shoes to fill with the rainbow colors from last year. So we just sort of wanted to officially make some requests of the town on behalf of the coalition. So I'm working on a formal request letter that's being vetted by our board, and was going to email it in advance of potentially attending your meeting next time to talk more about it. Is that enough? That teased you a little bit. Okay.
That whets our appetite and lets us know. All right, so we will make a note to put you on the March 1st agenda.
And okay. I have a broader question, which is why wouldn't we have an item for Anna or another representative to report out or collaborate with us at every meeting, since it seems like that work will be ongoing and our work will be ongoing. Seems like a reasonable idea to have more connection.
Yeah, I wonder if in the same way that we elected someone to be a liaison with the Hamilton Human Rights Commission, we could also have a liaison with the Hamilton-Wenham Human Rights Coalition. That's kind of what you're saying, Sam? And maybe Anna, your group could identify someone as well, unless you want it to be you.
Well, that person would be me. Our bylaws sort of talk about me as the official spokesperson to get things going. But once we start planning, I could imagine it being more of a collaborative group idea. So I'm definitely open to that, or emailing you in advance or making these sort of appearances in advance. However we want to handle it is totally, Sam, to your point, I welcome the collaboration very much, because I do think that's sort of part of the spirit of all of this, as we work together in slightly different ways that harmonize with each other. They're not exactly the same, but there's some overlap here. So,
and heaven forbid we either work redundantly or across purposes because of a lack of communication. That's really what I was thinking.
I wholeheartedly agree. That's why I reached out to Martha to say, could I get on your agenda, let you know some things are happening. And then the other thing, which I know Martha and I talked about, is there is a high school student who's been working on land acknowledgement, and I've been acting essentially as their sponsor through the municipal process. And Tom has also been a little bit helpful with that. I want to acknowledge him. So that's another thing I think is scheduled for the agenda for the March meeting, is a Indigenous land acknowledgement idea. So it was another thing that's on our radar.
Yep, we'd originally hoped to have that on this agenda, but that's getting pushed to March. So maybe at the March meeting, we could discuss making an agenda item, like a permanent agenda item for the coalition. That sound good?
Yeah, and I'm happy to make a regular or semi-regular appearance. I think it'd just be a matter of coordinating schedules and making sure it's always on my radar and with the idea that I might not always be able to do it, but maybe somebody else could do that, you know, in my stead. So there you go.
Sounds good. Thank you, Anna.
All right, thanks, guys.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to make a comment at this time?
Martha, could I just comment on what Anna just said? Would it make
Sure.
sense for us
Yeah.
to have, when we get our reminder of a meeting, to have it go to Anna also? Just to give her a prompt, which I totally understand.
Sure.
Would that make sense?
I can add Anna to my HRC Outlook mailing list. So
That's a great idea, Jen. And I
public those, I mean, all of our agendas are public anyway. So
no, but I think I feel like Janet feels my pain as someone on a
I
lot of
do.
boards and the committees. It's like
I do, I do.
I know you do. I know you have a personal affinity for what it's like to try to manage all these places. So I'm
Take-
happy.
Send me an email, and then Jackie sends one again, or Tom does, I'm not sure who, that day, and I go, oh yeah, I have that meeting tonight.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I think that would be great. And I really do want to underscore how much the coalition is excited about working on these partnerships with both towns. It's, you know, it's what we imagined when we sort of pushed to make it all happen. And now that it's real, I think that language is spot on, Sam, about working together and not at cross purposes and making sure that the right hands and the left hands are always talking to each other. So I think that'd be great.
sounds great.
Cool.
All right. So anyone else from the public want to make a comment at this time? If not, you can put your video on or raise your hand or, okay, seeing nothing. I'm gonna look for a motion to approve the minutes from both the 1/4 and the 1/21 meeting. I'm assuming everyone got a chance to read Janet's excellent minutes. And if there were any questions or corrections, now would be the time to let us know. It sounds like there isn't, so I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Pat, you're on mute.
So sorry.
All right, so I heard a motion from Sam, and do you want to
Second.
second it?
Yeah.
All in favor, and we will do a roll call where you're going to say your name and say aye or nay, and I will start and say Martha, aye, and then Kevin,
Kevin, I.
Tova,
Tova, I.
Janet,
Janet, I.
Sam,
Sam, aye.
Pat,
Patricia, I.
and sorry, Emma, I really wish I could let you vote. It just seems wrong to not include you, but so. Okay, so that was approved unanimously. So Sam, I'm going to kick it over to you. And if you need to be a host to share screen, if you I know Tom is expert.
I don't. I just checked.
Okay.
So I think I may actually be able to just.
Just put you on share screen, Sam. So let's see how you do.
How'd I do? Can you guys see anything?
Yep,
Yeah.
It's like I do 9 hours of Zoom a day.
I know, right?
All right. So let me set this up. So this is a draft of a concern raising process that we stole quite brazenly from the town of Lexington. And I thought all I was going to have to do was replace Lexington with Wenham and I'd be done. But that was not the case because the Lexington process had a lot more arbitration powers. And so I had to strip out a lot of stuff. So as I go through this, I'm going to make a recommendation to do something I didn't do, which is you'll see this process flow chart here covers a number of different situations. I don't actually think we necessarily need to parse out all these different situations. I think we could just have one, but I wanted to leave them in case members of this group who are smarter than me thought of some really important reasons that we should have the distinction. So let me just run us through the flow chart really quickly, and then we'll jump into the detail. So basically, each one of these boxes with the underlined text has a page describing what you do as part of that process. So when a complaint comes in, And that's the work that Tova was doing that we'll review next on the standard complaint form. The first question that the chair, I think, who is supposed to review them asks, is this a civil rights or a human rights issue? And if the answer is yes, then it falls under our purview. If the answer is no, then I'll cover that in a moment. And then they're broken into these 3 boxes. And let me lay out sort of my understanding of these boxes, and then we can discuss. So one is a disagreement with an individual. And so, this could be, that somebody reports having an experience with a cashier at the gas station, or something like that, or a neighbor. The next is a concern voiced by an individual, but it's with something more systemic. So it's an individual reporting a concern about, I don't know, some form of the, the public services that we have on offer, or a concern about, systematic abuse in a job nearby, something like that. And then the third, I think, is different from the second, in that the third is not that an individual has come with a complaint. It's that the committee has become aware of systemic issues that impact a protected class. And so the way I understood differentiating the second and the third was that the second really was an individual reporting a complaint. The third was more sort of what do you do if you get a bunch of rumors, or if there's a newspaper release or something that brings to the attention of the committee systemic issues that impact everybody in a protected class. Does that make sense? The distinguishing?
Yeah, I wonder, do you think we could come up with an example of each one to kind of, the dispute with the individual seems, pretty straightforward, but like the systemic one, this last one, is that something that would be sort of like hate leafleting, or anti-Semitic graffiti at the cemetery, or something like that?
Well, or it could be a newspaper article on biased hiring practices somewhere, right? Could be a number of different.
Whereas the second one is something more along the lines of,
it's an individual reporting about a system or an organization. So it's an individual saying, well, my place of work did this to me, versus an individual saying, my neighbor, another individual.
Okay, I see the distinction. Does anyone else have a question on that? Okay.
So the problem with these distinctions is that, given the limited scope of our powers, I wasn't actually able to come up with a different process for these 3 different situations. So I feel like we can probably just collapse them all into one. But let me dive into the detailed workflow for these, and then maybe we can come back to this question. So let's say that the matter does not potentially concern, and I would like to change civil rights issue to a human rights issue, if that's all right with folks. But basically, if it does not potentially concern a human rights issue, then we're sort of committing to do 3 things: work to inform the individual of resources and advocates who can help, right? So who are the folks for whom this is in scope, including referring to another government entity that can help, and explain that we're not equipped to help them, right? So offering them other opportunities for support. And then we're also obligated to keep a short description of what happened and a log of all completed forms, so that information is not lost.
Okay.
Right. So assuming that this comes to us via the standardized form, we're obligated to keep that somewhere, just so that we have it, just in case it's needed at some point in the future.
And are we going to address whether those are anonymous or not? I know you said there's something in here about stripping it of its,
Yep, I'll get to that.
Okay.
I don't know, right?
Yeah, I don't
Whether or
know
not
either,
we're
but
allowed
we're
to
allowed.
anonymize,
I know, I don't.
but I'll
that's-
get to what I think the right approach is.
Okay,
So that's it. That's what we are responsible for doing in an instance where the matter is out of scope for us. Okay, if it's in scope, whether it's box 1, 2, or 3. So ignore the top because this is the same
for all
for
three.
all 3 of the things because I really couldn't come up with differentiating characteristics. So I'm not going to read these bullets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain them. So Martha as chair would designate 2 members of this group plus anyone else plus a potential third person outside of this group that she thinks would be relevant to the case to then become the case reviewing subcommittee. So that subgroup would be responsible and would not be required to report back to the chairperson until the conclusion of the investigation. The person who filed the complaint would then have an interview with that group of 2 to 3 people who would document that complaint in a, I said, de-identified manner. Right, so there would be no identifying information included in that documentation. Then and I call this the incident response team. So the IRT members would consult with the Wenham PD if it seemed like there might be part of the matter for the PD to manage. And we'd sort of consult on that and then advise the complainant about what they ought to do. If it's not a Wenham PD matter, it might be a matter that should be addressed by other organizations within our town government or state government for that matter, in which case the IRT would recommend and help to contact those supporting organizations, again, to make sure that the complainant is getting access to the right people to help them with their particular concerns. I thought it was worth laying out that if there are facts in dispute, if there's uncertain history, we're not empowered to make any of those decisions. We're not empowered to mediate. And so what we would do is we would advise on what we think are the best avenues for the complainant to address disputed facts, right? To get advocacy while continuing to support that individual. And then if we note something that we believe that our committee should be taking action on, then the IRT will ask permission of the complainant to raise that with the appropriate body, right? So it doesn't just include reporting out to this committee, but it could be raising it to the, the water committee or the historical committee or other groups that fall within our town governance that the IRT could become a group to advocate and support that person as they need it, but it would have to be with their permission. Next, and feel free to interrupt if you have questions. Next, where appropriate, the IRT will draft a finding letter that is presented to the chair during our formal meeting for the purpose of sharing with the Board of Selectmen to fulfill our mandate to advise on changes that need to take place, since we're not empowered to make any of those changes. But that would also come with the permission of the reporting individual. And then all reports are documented in a de-identified manner, and we are to track and keep that information in a secure location so that we have those records should we need them. So let me stop there and open things up for questions. And it looked like we got a couple comments while we were in the chat window. So I want to take a quick look. Oh,
No,
okay.
I
Looks like
think
everybody's in.
Yeah.
Nothing related to this. All right.
Yeah.
So let me stop there and see if folks have questions.
I just see one correction, Sam. You've got the Gary Library, but I think you want the Hamilton one on
I
public. Way.
do. Thank you.
Gary is Lexington, yes.
Right.
I had a question, Sam. I know that there was discussion that our charge does not include investigation, and yet we still are kind of using that word. I don't know if there's a better word for it, and I maybe ask Kevin this. Is there any danger of us having this this complaint would come to us and we would have a conversation for us to sort of help the person determine whether they should seek help from the police. Is that how I'm reading it, Sam? Is that right?
That is part of the purview of the IRT, yes.
The police or another agency or someone
Or
at
another agency,
someone
right?
at the school system. I guess maybe Kevin, you could, and I know you're later on the agenda to discuss something similar, but like how is your process of taking a?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go a softer term, it could, we could just call it an inquiry or a review or something like that. Investigation, I can see what you're saying, where it's a little kind of a harder term, more police specific. So it can certainly be a review.
And I know that was a specific thing that the selectmen did not charge us with having as part of our charter. So
sure.
Let's find a softer word.
I like inquiry or
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too.
It's more than a conversation, but less than we don't give the complainant the idea that we have some power that we don't have.
Right.
I believe the challenge that you have, Martha, is that the HRC was created by a town meeting vote, if I'm correct. And I believe the description actually stated that you cannot investigate.
Yeah, I think actually it wasn't a town meeting vote. It was a vote by the Board of Selectmen. But you're right, it definitely doesn't say investigate, but that doesn't mean that we have to have a process by which we and disseminate, collect complaints and
I think we can differentiate between collecting enough information so that we can take appropriate action, right? Versus investigating and like resolving some kind of it. Like we don't investigate, we don't mediate, we don't, we don't take a stance on who's right, who's wrong. So there's got to be some way for us to collect enough information that we can support and advocate, right? Without, mediating or doing anything more firm.
Right. Well, I would think it would be similar to like Hawk, right? If they can send somebody with a victim to, like they can be there as a supportive person, but they're not involved in the investigation. I mean, this is kind of a question for Kevin. I wouldn't want us to do anything that would mess up a further investigation if it was serious enough to have to go to the police.
But we also need to know enough to be able to make those recommendations.
Right. And maybe I watch too much true crime stuff, but I don't want to like mess up the investigation and then have it be, well, if it wasn't for that committee.
No, I mean, you're not crazy with that thought process. There's been many a time in my career where people have jumped ahead with certain investigations and kind of took it upon themselves in good intentions 99% of the time. And it does cause problems sometimes for the investigative end of it for police. So we have to really be cognizant of that if it does cross over into that police specific criminal type investigation, that we put the brakes on, because it could cause problems without a doubt.
Well, Kevin, you must also get neighborhood disputes, or
All
for
the
example, you were involved in the Black Lives Matter sign stealing thing. So
Yes.
like, do you have any advice for us on how if it came to us first, is that like we're there to be supportive and give them the, courage or whatever they need to report to
Yeah.
the police?
I almost feel like it, and maybe for lack of a better term, we're advocating with the person, the victim, if you will, to navigate them in the right direction, whether it's a softer direction in one area or the unfortunate direction if it has to go the law enforcement route. But almost like my wife's a nurse, like she talks about patient care advocates all the time, and it navigates them through the system to
Right.
make sure they're on the right path. And there's really no different that we could act in that body. And that's why the police liaison, I think, is so important, because it kind of bridges that gap. And so I think it's kind of neat that we're able to do that, because we can keep that line of communication open.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just trying to think. So in this situation, if we had something that the IRT determined should definitely, be taken to the police, would you want us to reach out to you as the liaison on this committee, or is this just a call the front desk and get who's ever?
No, I that type of investigation, it would most likely be administrative, either up at my level or the detective. I wouldn't want, we have a lot of reserve officers, and we have some newer full-time officers, and I wouldn't want to put them in that uncomfortable position to there's certain investigations that we want to kind of channel to the right direction, or an experienced full-time officer or a reserve that's been around for a long time, that's fine. But to have a newer officer be put in a situation that's kind of outside their comfort zone and or experience, that wouldn't be fair to them. So I think navigating through the liaison, myself or whomever else is involved, once I get promoted and somebody takes over my position, I think that's a good start. I think that's a safer.
And to be clear, that is the intent of this. So
Okay.
if it's not clear, then let's make sure it's clarified.
Yeah, I think when we say consult with Wenham Police Department, member on okay, yeah, you're right. It was clear. I just read it too fast. Sorry, Sam.
No worries.
Anyone else have comments?
I think it looks good, Sam.
I wondered if we could try to talk through a scenario or two and see, how we would handle it, just to make it less abstract. Like, let's, for example, say somebody contacted us because or a person of color, and they got pulled over in town by the police, and they feel like maybe they got pulled over because of the color of their skin. This is like completely non-judgmental, not saying, what happened, but I anticipate that would be the type of thing that we could get an email about. And so, given this flow chart, what do people think about how that would go? Like, so jump in.
So I'll start with saying that we would need to work as a group, I think, on our, sort of consultation and discussion skills, right? It's very important to take a neutral, non-judgmental stance when asking questions and following up about things like this. And that is an art that takes a little bit of practice, and is definitely something that is worth putting time and effort into practicing. So that would be my first thought, is that when talking with somebody about this, we would want to take that neutral, non-judgmental stance. Then I think our job is basically, so you would get the first information about the incident.
Mm-hmm.
So you would need to pick the team. So presumably you would pick the team made up of the people that you thought had the most, relevant experience.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Is there a step in between? So I get an email from somebody. Do I respond and say, we received your email and an incident response team will be assigned to you? Like, I know I'm being very literal, but I don't want to let something simmer for a couple days.
No, it's a great point. I think you should. Yeah.
So I should have a kind of generic response that
Mm,
that kind of says, I received your thing, here's my, this is how the process will work, maybe
Yep.
even give them the flow
Yeah.
chart, say someone will be in touch.
Yep.
Would
Okay.
it make sense, Martha, for there to be some kind of boilerplate for that?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Jeremy, that I wouldn't have it be like the automatic response, but almost like I'd maybe have a couple of canned responses depending on the type, or maybe even not, maybe just have I like that idea, Jeremy, definitely.
Yep. So you would send a response, then you would put together that 2 or 3 member team. And so in thinking about that, you might pick, me, because that I'm a therapist, so I can take that neutral, non-judgmental stance, I
I'm
hope.
definitely picking you for the first one, so.
And then you might pick, Pat, for example, because she's connected with a lot of different, community organizations or something like that, and you might decide that because the police were involved, it's actually really important to just let's just put somebody, let's just put Kevin on there as well.
That's a good question. If it was about getting pulled over, is it better to have the initial interview without the police or not? It might feel threatening. I mean,
I think the answer is without,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
But
I
that
would
doesn't
not,
mean that the IRT shouldn't have
True.
a liaison on it, right?
Yep,
You can still
that's
make
true.
the decision not to do that, but it'd be nice to sort of have somebody potentially from PD who's there every step of the way.
Right, because the goal, in addition to supporting the person, is to de-escalate or at least,
And learn. Yeah.
yeah.
Ultimately our mandate is to, advocate to the Board of Selectmen for, for changes and ideas and to help surface these things. So, yeah, I think.
You wanted to jump in?
yeah, this is basically more so for Kevin, but I would probably not recommend a police individual on this because there may have to be an investigation internally if it was a job-related function.
Yep.
Great point.
Okay,
Great
so
point.
if it's a complaint about the police department, wouldn't initially approach the police department with the IRT members, and you're comfortable with that, Kevin?
Yeah, it gets real sticky because, like Tom had mentioned, that would turn into an internal affairs investigation that we would have to handle confidently, and we have a whole system of checks and balances and a procedural way of going about things with that. And not to mention, the only thing with this is if information were to come to this board before it made its way to the police department, time does become really vital and important to hop on that. And if God forbid the 1 in a million scenario where it's something that we need to address immediately because an officer is doing the wrong thing, then we can't expose anyone else to that in the public. We would have to. I mean, the allegation could be something as simple as an officer making an inappropriate comment, which could be a training issue, or it could be something as bad as a specific clear racial bias or violation, or stopping the person for the wrong reason, and that's a real serious issue where it would have to be hopped on immediately. So I think whatever it is, if it were to come to this body beforehand, it would just need to be pretty quick.
Well, let's work it through for a second, right? So let's say the two member group meets with the individual and collects any additional information, offers support, right? Basically says, look, this is the purpose of our group. This is what we're here to do. We are your advocates. We're here to support you. We're here to identify whether there's anything that our group can do, and also to help you to navigate, the politics and different organizations within our, our municipality or our town, right? And so there would be an initial meeting. And then after that meeting, I would think one of the things that an IRT member might do is reach out to Kevin or to someone, someone else and say, look, here's the scenario. We're not, what do we do? And Kevin might come back and say, I really need that person to file a complaint immediately. Here's how they do that. And then we could go back to that person and say, here's how you file a complaint. Right. And we could also say, and here's how you get connected with other local advocacy. If you want additional support, right. It's hard to plan exactly for that, for that scenario, depending on what that person needed. But, we could also say, look, here are some local resources for, local ACLU, other things like that we could try. And in some respects, we're going to sort of be making some of this up on a case by case basis and doing our best.
Well, yeah, we're going to learn by doing. That's 100% right. And there's going to be some bumps in the road where we might go through a scenario where we and I would definitely recommend, as we navigate through the first few of these, we do in police work, we call it an AAR, or an after action review, where we really take a strong look at, hey, here's what we did good. Here's what we screwed up on it. We could have done a lot better.
Good point.
And that's vital. And I know every time in police work, when we do it, every single time we do an after action review, communication is what comes up every time as an area that could have been better. And it's always about communication. So no matter what, even if we're cognizant ahead of time, we just miss, there's always a synapse somewhere where something could have got disseminated better. So that's just another something to be aware of.
Kevin,
So I have a suggestion.
Yep.
I'm not sure who knows this, but I'm on this committee partly because I have 2 minority children.
Okay.
So things that are going to come up that have to do, maybe Martha, just with the example you have to come up with, it might make sense for me to be on it. I agree with everything everyone has just said, but I was feeling a little bit like, and I don't mean this as a criticism, well, okay, we're going to listen to what you're saying, I'm going to pass you on to. That might make the complainant feel like we don't really care, but we do. So I think we have to be, I'm not sure how to do that, but I think we need to be careful to do that.
I was feeling that a little bit too, Janet, and I was thinking of saying that we would offer to go with or be with the person when they made their initial.
That's a good idea.
Offer to
Great
say,
idea.
would you like me to go with you to the police station, or would you like me to be there when you call? Because honestly, thinking about it, it might, if I put myself in that situation, I might take the advice and then walk away from that meeting and not follow up.
See, I think I would too.
And
honestly,
if I had someone there who I was sort of accountable to, because I made the complaint, because maybe you came to the Human Rights Commission because you were afraid to go to the police, or you were worried that it wasn't that big of a deal, and maybe I'm making too much of it. There's a lot of reasons that people might be hesitant. And so we're there to sort of encourage them to assert their human rights, or right. So
Martha, would it be a good idea for you to kind of have your IRT teams, obviously Janet would be the perfect person for what she was describing, but maybe if you got to know what other people might be good for, you'd have your teams in place for whatever scenario came up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also was wondering, time being of the essence in these things, but I'm cognizant of not trying to break open meeting law. Tom, am I allowed to ask who's available? I'm imagining something happening in the summer, and eventually we're all going to be able to go on vacation at some point or be away. Is it okay to say who's available, or is that not?
What I would recommend, Martha, is set up a process at a future meeting on the agenda about how you want to set it up, so at least you have the process discussed at an open meeting about how you're going to go down to either assign or contact members to be on the IRT for an incident.
Yeah, and Pat, the question would be what do people on this committee feel like their area of expertise might be?
Yeah, And then you wouldn't have to, then you sort of would have your go-to people, I think. I mean, other people could pitch in if someone's away, but
I also think it's important to be mindful. Sorry, I'm skipping back to the earlier topic about what the IRT can do for the person who's reporting. You know, the other thing the IRT can do and will do with permission is report on this to the Board of Selectmen when there's a, you know, systemic issue or when there's a matter for learning, right? So there's the greater Human Rights Committee has an obligation to report on this. And so there's also that sort of advocacy piece there. I realize that may feel like cold comfort when what you really want is, you know, directly addressing this. I like the idea of going with the person. Again, I think we have to make sure we don't overstep our mandate, but that doesn't seem like it oversteps our mandate at all, as long as we don't delve into the sort of investigation line of things, since that's quite clearly off limits.
Right, I think that we wouldn't talk in that meeting necessarily. We wouldn't repeat what they had told us. They would have to make their own statement to the police. We would just be there to, you know, just be somebody who can be supportive, so they don't feel like they're doing it by themselves.
Yeah, I like that.
So Martha, I have a question, just to bring Emma into this.
Yep.
So does all this work with Emma? She's obviously a really important part of the committee, though I know we all feel badly she can't vote, but she's in the midst of our high school environment, which is important for issues.
Right,
and
well,
how does that work with Emma?
My assumption is that I can put Emma on a team. I mean, she's a non-voting member, but if we had a situation that involved someone, like a complaint about the school system, you know, I think it would be helpful, or someone who was younger, like Antova or Emma's age, would probably be more comfortable with someone who was younger.
Well, I was thinking that would be really valuable because Emma's sitting in on our meetings and she's able to hear so much more versus just quote gossip that happens in all schools everywhere. She would have a good perspective on what we could do to help someone.
yeah.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think we were all selected because we're well-rounded people. The community trusts us to do this. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that each of us has a specialty and should be consulted because of that specialty. I mean, we're all on this committee because the town of Wenham trusts us to do this job. Not that, I mean, there are incidents like, you know, I understand like with the youth thing, like if there's something going on at the school, it makes sense to bring Emma in because she's closer and, you know, things like that. But I think that all of us have something to contribute to being on an IRT.
Yeah, and I agree, Jeremy. And I also think there's no way we're going to be able to plan for all eventualities.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Martha will do the best that she can to put together the right team. But
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way we can
Right.
proactively set up all the teams for all the things that'll come forward.
Yeah. And also like I'm a Mason, and when someone petitions the lodge for membership, we investigate them. So I've been on investigation teams for that. And what I've learned, also I've been the master of a lodge, is that you don't really know how good someone's going to be at this until you put them in that investigative role. And some people surprise you and are amazing at it. And some people take time to learn how to do that, you know?
Definitely. I think we're all going to be learning at first. And I also don't anticipate that we're going to be getting like 20 complaints a week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things we have to do, and maybe we should move on to looking at the complaint form. This is great, Sam. I think I like your idea about condensing it to one box. I'm not sure that we need
Great, because that makes the first part of this process much easier.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I
Whether
think
it's
this
in
is going to
scope
be,
or out of scope.
right. I think this is going to be something we need to like put up on Facebook and put up on our website. And, you know, we have to start getting the word out that we're a conduit for these kinds of things.
So I'll make those changes, and then we can review in our next meeting.
Okay.
Is
So
there any way to do that faster?
what's that?
Is there any way to go faster than a month?
Well, I mean, I think we could have a motion to approve as discussed with the edits as discussed that this process will be, so let me maybe make that motion so that Janet could actually write it down and make it sound sensible. I would entertain a motion that we approve this flow chart of complaint process with the edits that we discussed, condensing the multiple types of complaint to one. So we're either in scope or out of scope. And if people are comfortable with this, or we can have some, I'll entertain that motion and then we can have some discussion.
All right, can I just repeat what I think you said? So you can correct me right now while you're thinking of it?
Yep.
A motion to approve this flow chart with, oh God, the complaint process with edits to, that's where I lost you.
With edits as discussed.
As discussed. Okay, that's what I
That
missed.
leaves
Thank
it
you.
sufficiently vague that Sam can make the edits and we'll have approved.
Okay,
What
got it.
you're not.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do we want to make sure we understand? Yes, thank you for bringing it back to this page. So we're going to call it, are we taking out the civil rights and making it human rights?
Human rights, yeah.
And then these three boxes, the three other boxes, dispute with an individual, we're going to combine that into one.
Correct. It basically, it's going to be, is this a civil rights? Yes. And then it'll be investigation, support, and report versus no, which will be document complaint and refer to other agency for support.
Except that we're going to make investigation and inquiry.
Correct. I have that. I'm already editing the Word document.
Excellent.
Right.
Okay.
The third diamond, as is written, doesn't make sense because it's not a yes/no question.
Right. Well, we're going to combine all three.
Yeah, no, that's another reason to get rid of it.
Right.
But I think it is important to distinguish between an individual complaint, a complaint against an individual, and a complaint against a system.
I think it's not that we're not distinguishing between them. It's just that the process for how we attack each one of them is the same. So there's no reason to, we could actually maybe put as examples, you know, in the flow chart. And when we kind of put together our marketing plan to like get this information out there, I think having examples of the types of things that someone might report makes it much clearer than using these kind of, I don't want to say jargony because that's pejorative, but you know, some of these words are sort of a little bit business jargony. Does that address your concern, Jeremy?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, okay. So Antova, sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to say that in the intake form, there's space to like specify kind of what of these three, not exactly these three, but there is space to specify what that is. And like, I can also make that even more specific and like if we want that, so.
Okay, so we're going to get to you next because I'm cognizant of the time. So let's.
I think we're there. Yeah, I think we're there.
Are there any more discussion or we'll vote on this motion? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call then, and I'll start with myself. All in favor? Martha? Aye. Janet?
Aye.
You have to
Janet,
say.
aye.
Yes.
Sorry,
Sam?
Janet, aye.
Yep. Sam?
Am I?
Pat?
Patricia, I.
Jeremy?
Jeremy, I.
Tova?
Tova, aye.
Kevin?
Kevin, I.
All right, great. So Tova, do you want to do a share screen or does Sam have your, I also have your form if you do it on my screen if you don't have it.
Yeah, that's fine. I have it. I don't know how to share my screen, so It might be, if you have it
Okay.
right there, or I
I
can
do
figure
have
out.
it. Tom, can you make me a shareable person? Wait, you're on mute.
Yep, you should be.
I think we all had permission.
Yeah,
Oh.
you all have permission.
That's dangerous.
Just, I know, but it made it easier.
All right, hold on. I just gotta, here it is.
Yep, there you go, Martha.
Right. So this is kind of similar if any of you used the intake form to apply for being on this committee. It's a similar form, I think will be easy to add to the website. So Tova, you just tell me to move up and down and you can walk us through this.
Yeah, so I use the Lexington like form to see, so most of it is like kind of what they had. But basically like your information, the person who's like providing or making a complaint or concern.
Yeah.
And that's like their basic information. And then I took the word respondent from the Lexington's page, but so that's like the person being or entity that's like being accused in a way. So just kind of like depending on if it's an individual or like business, institution, or government body, I don't know. I can change that depending on how people feel, but just having the person give that information to the best of their ability. And like if they're able to provide like further information about a contact, or like if it's a business, specifically an address, not necessarily an individual's address, I don't think. And then it's information about what happened. And so that's like where I have just like the rights violation.
Okay.
And so they can choose, you can scroll down if you're able to.
Yep.
They kind of are identifying like where or how they think their rights were violated in what area. So that can help us understand maybe where we need to narrow it down into. And then if you keep going down, this is just like further like understanding what's going on, like why they think their rights were violated. And then we have, then I kind of was asking like, is this an ongoing thing? Or if it was just a one-time thing, and then if they're able to summarize what happened and give a date for maybe the most recent incident.
Okay.
And then I really liked what the Lexington page had, so I kept it, but like saying like how you would like to see us support you. And then also if they've already contacted another agency about this, to just let us know. And that's really it.
I wonder if we want to put any of the other agencies that we might be referring people to on this list, like
Yeah, that
department
makes
or,
sense.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would
Martha.
add one more category, which is there anything further you would like to share? Just sort of as a grab bag, you know?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
That what's going on is not something we've anticipated, and therefore there's no slot for it. So
Okay.
Absolutely.
Was someone else wanting to jump in?
Yep, Martha.
Yep.
Okay, didn't see myself on there. Question I have is on the form. The form is fine. Question I have is, are we taking, or the HRC, are they taking complaints for a Wenham resident if the action occurred in another community? Such as, let's say, the incident occurred in Beverly at a business or whatever. Are you taking the complaint in there, or are you advising them to contact the city of Beverly?
Well, I don't think that is in our purview. That's just my opinion.
Right, but I'm just saying, looking at
The Beverly Human Rights.
I disagree. I think if they live in Wenham and they have a concern, we should deal with it. Even
Right,
if it means we just communicate with, for example, Beverly.
Right. We could offer support in them reaching out to Beverly, like government, whatever, whoever they need to talk to.
Yeah, we're here to help. I really don't want to tell anyone your problem is not our problem, you know? I mean, if you start
but
getting
I'm
swamped,
just
that might
wondering,
be
is that within our, I mean, are we supposed to be dealing just within our town? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like it could go, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm fine with it, but I just am wondering, do we need to have that clarified by someone?
Mhm.
I think as long as it's a Wenham resident, I think that's the critical.
Right, well, I think in the charge, I just can't put my fingers on it fast enough, but there was a specific thing because it said Wenham residents, but it also said visitors to Wenham. So it's sort of like the opposite of that, right? Like if you're a Wenham resident and something happened to you in Hamilton, I think we would or any neighboring town, I think we would be a resource. I mean, maybe they need to file a state complaint or something, but I think if it's a Wenham resident who's had their human rights violated, we should help them.
Right. The reason I came up with that is we're looking at the form, trying to make the determination, somebody used the form, but the incident occurred in Beverly or Topsfield and such, how would the HRC handle that?
So I can.
Go ahead.
We could add even like the simple like clarification of like, did this occur outside of Wenham? If yes, are you a Wenham resident or something like that to kind of understand if that's, I don't know if that would be helpful.
I mean, I think the more people that we can help and be a resource to, the better. So even if if we're helping people who aren't residents in our town, if something happens, I don't really see the difference to helping someone access help. And again, I don't think if it came to be that we're getting 20 of these a week, then maybe we would have to revisit our bandwidth on that. But I don't think that's going to be an issue. But I could imagine somebody having something happen in Beverly and just not knowing where to go.
Yeah.
So so we would act as a resource for them.
A conduit, a resource.
Yeah, I have just read over the the sort of duties of this. I didn't see anything that would not say specifically couldn't. So
nothing to preclude it. Okay.
No,
good. Thank you for checking on that. I think that's a worthwhile, question to make sure that we know what we're dealing with. If someone's going to take the trouble of actually emailing us or filling out this form. So then, Tom, I guess the next question is, if there is this fillable form, how does that information get downloaded and sent to me? Or if that might be something I can deal with Nikki, I can ask her about how that works.
You can ask her, we can work on that with you.
Okay. So shall we entertain a motion to approve this form with the edits as discussed so that we could get this up and running before our next meeting? I'll entertain that motion to approve the form.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that or questions?
So just so I know, the edits would be adding anything else that they'd like to share. And did I miss one thing? Was there something specific about the resident or where it occurred?
I think when you're asking that, I think just to make sure in the part where you're getting the specifics of where they live and where the incident happened, just to make sure that we're capturing that.
Okay.
Okay, then if there's nothing else, I'll take a roll call vote to approve the motion on the floor, and I'll start with myself. Martha, aye. Sam?
Sam, aye.
Tova?
Tova, aye.
Jeremy?
Jeremy, aye.
Pat?
Patricia, aye.
Janet?
Janet, aye.
And Kevin?
Kevin, aye.
All right, Kevin, is your spot in the agenda. So I think we had talked about this at our very first meeting to sort of understand what sort of your hopes and expectations are for your role on this committee. And just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and that we're supporting what you need and you're supporting what we need and we're all working on this together.
No, and that's great. You know, I spoke with the chief a lot about this, and I've been reaching out to my colleagues in the field and kind of looking at different things. I took a strong look at I was super impressed with Lexington as well. I was looking at that, and it's kind of a crazy time right now, as we all know, for a number of different reasons with law enforcement. And I think the biggest thing, there are a few things that have popped into my head that I think are important on both sides. First of all, before I forget, I think what Sam had said relative to keeping an open mind as these things come in, whether it's law enforcement related or not, is so important. I think what sometimes can happen is we, you know, and it's human behavior, and we're all guilty of it, and I'm guilty of it. And from the law enforcement perspective of it, is you hear an allegation and you immediately kind of allow yourself for the emotion to kick in, and you lock into that. And I think it's so important, to the best of our ability, is to stay neutral and detached and look at everything and get the big picture and do our due diligence across the board. I think that's vital. But relative to what I'm hoping more than anything from my end, I'm hoping to answer the questions that are out there from the folks in our community and from you guys as well on the committee with me, because I still feel like there's a lot of questions out there that folks have. And I think taking over the agency, I think one of the things I really want to focus on is full transparency. That's so important, because if the community has the trust in the police department, and they can understand what we're doing, not only on a day-to-day basis, but how we're handling our training and our policy dissemination, and a lot of it relative to this new police reform bill ties into a lot of these areas that are being addressed. And the fact that we are an accredited police department puts us at a level where that base foundation, it's a really nice jumping off point. It's not a cover-all and it's not a cure-all by any stretch, but it puts us in a real solid standing that our policies, our procedures, our day-to-day operations are already where they need to be. And what I mean by that is, relative to accreditation, these are the best practices. We have to adhere to 400 and some guidelines and standards of excellence on a daily, monthly, yearly basis that are best practices determined by men and women in the field of law enforcement that move with the times. And that's what's so important, is it keeps law enforcement agencies honest and progressive, because without it, it allows you to stagnate and fall behind. And the best example I like to use, and I use it a lot, and an old chief that I had maybe 15, 20 years ago used to say all the time when he was explaining the importance of accreditation with the police department, is he said, if someone in your family or someone that you love had to go to a hospital, do you want them going to a hospital that has 400 some odd standards of excellence that hospital has to adhere to on a regular basis? Or do you want them going to a hospital that has no standards? Your police department should be no different. What we do on a daily basis is so important. So I think helping the public and the residents and the people understand how we work, how we operate, what we think about things, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication on both sides. By no fault of anybody's own, it just happens with, whether it's the media, whether it's social media, whether it's things that a police officer might say or do, or things that a member of the public might say or do. It causes so much confusion, so much raw emotion, that I think if clear, definitive, honest answers are given, I trust that most people, if they're being talked to honestly, they might not love it and they might not even agree with it, but they respect it and appreciate it. And I think if I focus on that from our agency, and I know Chief Perkins always has, I think that's a huge start. And I was talking to a fellow chief today, and I was trying to get my ducks in a row for tonight to make sure I kind of covered everything. And, he touched on it. He says, Kev, you got to know what the public wants from you, from your police department, how we can together implement this procedural justice, how we can get things done together, because there's stuff that we're missing, that we don't know, that we're naive to what's really out there. And hopefully that kind of makes sense. There's so many moving parts right now, but I'd be more than happy to candidly answer any thoughts or questions that you guys have.
Kevin, I have one. I'm going back to our little scenario there with, there's a complaint about the police department. Yep. Now, what if a person comes and they express their concern about something that happened to them, but then they don't want to take it any further? Do you want us as a committee to still say, look, this happened, this is something, but they didn't take it beyond this? I mean, we can't force people to, maybe it's just a venting session they want.
That's also where we can be advocates anonymously, right? That's actually a really terrific function we can perform. Is you don't have to put yourself forward. We can actually do it for you.
And the beauty of that too is through accreditation and through our policies and procedures, we have to investigate even anonymous complaints. And then through our collective bargaining in our union, there's a way to do it, a fair, honest way to do it that our officers all know exists. In our offices, we got good people. We got people that they're really, really good people, and they get it and they understand. And guess what? And I always say this, the good cops want the bad cops to be investigated. The guy or girl who's working their butt off, they don't want to work side by side with an officer that's either unethical or has racist tendencies or just is doing the wrong thing, because it tarnishes their badge. And just like we saw what's happened in this country, 1,500 miles away, a police officer does a horrible thing that cannot be justified or explained in any way, shape, or form. But in doing that, a brush was created. And that hurt a lot of incredibly good, passionate, honest, articulate police officers that have given their life to the field. And we got to try to fix that too, because, I've been doing this for 25 years and I can candidly say, and I have no problem saying it, in my 25 years as a full-time police officer, thank the Lord, I've never been exposed to seeing other officers doing horrible or racist things. I've never seen it. And I know it's out there and I know it exists and I know it's real, without a doubt. But there's most of the men and women that I've worked with are they're good people that would literally give their life tomorrow for any one of us. And I think without a doubt, they want the people that are doing the wrong thing to not be wearing that badge. And I know that without a doubt. So they know there's a way. They're not offended by it. If they see us having to follow up on an investigation, whether it's an anonymous complaint or an open, clear complaint, they know there's a procedure that has to be done. There's a process that has to be done. Every police department in the country has that internal affairs investigation policy in place. It's a crappy part of the job. Nobody wants to do it, but we have to do it, and they understand that and they get that.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
What I really like about that conversation is it really does speak to the potential for this group, right? Is that if we can build trust, we can become an anonymous spokesman for people who don't feel comfortable speaking up for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we should really embrace. That's a real opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
Okay, if no one else has another question, I do.
Sure.
And just in terms of, as for us as a group, at what point, particularly if it involves some form of abuse, child neglect or something like that, that we are privy to, but the person making the complaint or the allegation does not want to take it that next step? What are our obligations as a group or as this group? Do we have something that we cannot just say, well, they don't want to bring it forward, so, or is it totally
mandated? You mean like
So full
like a mandated reporter?
Yeah, full disclosure, I am a mandated reporter. And
As
so
am I.
if I hear
I am
about
too.
it, if I hear about it, I have to report it.
I
Yeah.
am too.
Yeah, I've been one in the past.
So how do we let people know that if they tell us something that, say, for example, Sam, someone comes to you and says blah, blah, blah. And at what point do you say, okay, now no matter what, I have to go and report this?
So you tell them before they give you enough detail for you to actually have to take action. So
Yeah,
if they come
Okay.
forward and they're like, listen, I want to tell you about this thing that's happening to my,
Yeah.
so-and-so, you're like, listen, I need to let you know I'm a mandated
Yeah.
reporter. Anything about child or elder abuse, I have to report to the appropriate agency. I'm happy to have this conversation, but I want to be transparent and let you know that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if it comes up super fast,
Yeah.
then you just, it's the first thing you do, the very first moment, you just, have to be as transparent as possible.
I would
Yeah.
think, Sam, we would know enough from the, the initial email or form
I would hope so,
to know that we need to lead with that, but that might be something we want to.
but I would think we should all approach this as if we're mandated reporters.
I agree.
Part of the reason for mandated reporting is that most of the stuff with regard to abuse and controlling behavior and neglect, the reason it goes unreported is because everyone feels like it's not their job to report, and that's why mandated reporting was created. So I think it's a good thing for us to embrace.
Tom, you wanted to jump in?
I do, but someone else apparently wants to.
Yeah.
jump in too. A question I have, and let's say you receive a complaint that is not as extreme as what Sam has just somewhat described. You have someone who says an incident at town hall, somebody made a remark or a comment to a customer, and they bring it to the HRC, but they don't want to report it. How do you rank? I want to know, if I'm the town administrator here, I want to know if somebody is not treating the customer in the right way. So how do you handle something that may not be as extreme as you've described, but still is an incident that I really need to be notified about?
I think it's the same way we were going to do it with Kevin. If there are complaints that they bring to us, but that they don't want to take forward, we are going to de-identify we'll take out the specifics of the person, but you would still get the information about the complaint, because that would be part of our reporting back to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Right, Sam, am I getting that right based on the process flow?
Yeah, that's exactly what the process says is, we can, in an anonymized format, we can advocate. And then if we decide that it needs to be formally reported to the Board of Selectmen as part of our purview, we can also do that anonymously. We don't have to do it anonymously if the person wants to be named, but we can always take the anonymous approach.
But Tom, were you saying you'd want to know that right away in the same way that Kevin wants to know right away if he has to do an investigation?
Most definitely. Whoever is sitting in the seat, I could probably tell you if there is an incident, they would want to know right away.
That's in there. I'm pretty sure we've got that covered already in the existing workflow under the heading, if not Wenham PD matter, where appropriate, IRT members contact other government agency, committee, commission to support and advocate for the individual.
Yeah.
I think we've got that pretty clear.
Yeah.
And has the issue of whether we can keep somebody's confidentiality been addressed?
Yeah. I've actually contacted town council to ask, have one of their attorneys appear at one of the HRC meetings. I'm waiting the response, but I've requested that.
Okay,
so those
thank
questions
you.
could be all brought up at
So the trick here is if we document in a de-identified manner, right, and we stick to our documentation,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't have to worry about anonymizing things after the fact. So as long as we're careful about our written documentation, not including any identifying information, we're in okay shape.
Right, and to that point, if we have this IRT that's less than a quorum of this committee, then then we don't have to discuss it as a committee, the individual incident, unless it's something that turns into a bigger townwide thing, right? So it doesn't, I mean, in terms of protecting somebody's privacy, they're not gonna fear that we're gonna discuss this at an open public meeting. Are we able to make that pledge, or do we have to wait till we talk to the lawyers?
I would probably wait until council, and hopefully at your next meeting, council will be available to appear.
I will say my understanding reading through the whole Lexington thing was that's why they did that, was because that allows you to get outside of the open meeting laws and share information that you don't later share back with the public meeting.
Right, and that's why you don't talk, the process flow doesn't go back to the chair. The chair assigns the thing, and then the chair never hears back, and there would be no reason for us to hear back until we were consolidating the information for our report to the Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
But we do want to get that confirmed by our own town council.
I had a question for Kevin.
Okay.
Does the Wenham police force, or is there a larger Massachusetts training? Do you guys undergo any kind of specific microaggression and racial bias training?
We do. They get it in the academy, and then we do it on an annual basis. It's an accreditation requirement.
Okay.
So our officers have to get. In fact, we just put it out again, maybe 2 weeks ago. I put out a whole thing on it. And then the reform bill, I think, covers some of that in the training as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you, Kevin. That was a really good conversation, as Sam was saying. We'll
Thanks.
just keep the lines of communication going both directions. So I know it's getting late. And maybe we can defer the next item on the agenda, which was to sort of discuss the role that we might take in upcoming regional celebrations, and because it's going to be on the agenda next week with maybe a formal request. But my assumption is that we would at least promote and encourage these kinds of things from the municipal level.
I like the idea of waiting, since Anna is coming to report out from her committee. So I think it makes sense to wait a month.
Okay. So the last thing I had on the agenda was another one of these little assignments that a small group might take. And again, I don't want to recreate the wheel, but I did notice that some of the better human rights websites did have links to kind of human rights and anti-racist reading lists. So I don't know how people felt about that. We can certainly look at the lists that are out there and kind of call them, but I thought it might be something that a small two-person group could at least tackle, see what's out there. But I wasn't sure how we might vet that as a group, or what people felt about that.
What, can you clarify what you mean by that, Martha?
So if you look on some of the other town Human Rights Commission lists, there's often links to movies or books that address some of these issues. And, back in June, there was like a BLM reading list. There's also, for all of the different human rights areas, just in case somebody was looking, like say somebody's child comes out to them and they are just looking for some reading, to try to get up to speed on something. This would be a reading list that they could find easy links.
I would recommend that we try to strip as much as we can from work that's already been done by other towns that we think have done a really good job, rather than try and reinvent the wheel. And then we can, massage it a little bit and add to it with our own flavor. But that would be my suggestion.
I've done about a 6-page list for another human resource group, and that I could, you could use it. It's a list of specific books about diversity for children. I don't know if you want to do something like that.
That could be a part of it for sure, but I'm definitely with Sam in that we don't want to I think we should maybe look at a couple of different sites. So maybe Pat and I could be a subcommittee and we could
Mhm.
something back
Sure.
next month with a list that people could look at.
Sure. Now, how do you want to do it, Martha? Do you want me just to send you what I find?
Why not? Yeah, well, why don't you and I both, why don't we talk to maybe tomorrow
Okay.
and we'll
Okay.
figure out a
That's
plan. Okay, so
Yep.
that's gonna be Pat and Martha.
Can you guys, it looks like Janet's off camera, so can you follow up with her to make sure that that goes on the agenda?
Yep. Gets in the minutes. Yep.
Yeah.
I think this is recorded too and she's able to play it back.
Oh, great, okay.
So this is going to be resource lists.
Yeah.
Well, and just a web presence, right? I mean, there are probably other groups. There are definitely other groups that we can learn from in terms of like, how do you make a welcoming internet space and how do you make people feel drawn in instead of put off? And I bet some folks have figured out a really good way of doing that.
Yeah, I just think our town Human Rights Commission website should have some basic materials on it that people could, you know, in addition to places for them to access, just some basic materials on on all the subjects that we're passionate about and covering. Okay.
I was
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if anybody kind of knew off the top of their head, is it within our mandate to like present our own suggestions or something like to the town? Because I know like we're talking about obviously supporting citizens who are having issues, and then also like if the coalition brings these ideas that they like we can decide to back. But if we decide that like there's something missing that we want to kind of suggest the town take on, where does that role lie?
I think that definitely, it came up at the last meeting, like if we decide we want to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they change the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board.
Right.
That we could, you know, we could talk about at a meeting and make a motion and, you know.
Okay.
So that, things like that. And I will just say that I've already had outreach from other town departments to say, you know, we're reviewing our regulations. We want you guys involved. So I think there'll be lots of opportunities. But yeah, if it's a see something, say something, Tova. If you see something you think that this group should address or anybody on the committee, this is the place to do it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Martha, I've been suggesting that to Gary since I've come here.
Yeah. And Gary also is.
Yeah, he's. I think that's going to be happening sooner than later.
Gary has a lot on his plate, but yeah, I mean, you know, language is important and representation matters, and you know, there are lots of places squirreled into bylaws and guidelines that we need to make more inclusive, and that's definitely part of our mandate.
Agreed.
We're gonna crawl before we walk. Is there anything else that anyone wants to bring up, or we can confirm our next meeting, which is March 1st at 6. We're good. Thank you, Sam and Tova, for the work you did on the process.
Yeah,
really
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Once you get those edits in, if you want to send them to me, I'll work with Nikki to get that up on the town site.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. All right. I hope that we don't have too much shoveling to do tomorrow.
You know, it's actually raining outside.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I'm worried about flood.
This is one of those, the weathermen are going to really regret that they got so upset.
Hey, better be worried and have nothing bad happen than lackadaisical and have something bad happen.
Yeah, I just hope we don't lose power because the you know, the community house has about 7 sump pumps to keep the water out.
No.
We do have a generator, but the water table in Hamilton is very, very high. So,
but that's one issue is I've actually, this is off the subject, but I am interested, and I probably won't be here, but we really should be looking at our public safety, our aspects of emergency generators, town hall and such. Because we don't have one here.
Really?
Huh.
There may be some temporary, but you find out in a lot of town halls, and I've been able to put 2 in town halls. Town halls generally sometimes do not look at emergency generators as a necessity. But my last 2 town halls, we made sure the we installed emergency generators.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Mhm.
It's a little more difficult when you're in a historic district. I've learned that.
Yes. Well, Wenham's a little better at keeping the lights on than Hamilton. I'll say that. Some of the things we can
Our
hold
town.
over.
Not disrespecting, this is no disrespect to historic districts, but you do go through a different process when your town hall's in a district.
Oh,
Mhm.
please.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
We tried to put solar panels on our house, which is right on Main Street, and that did not go well.
Oh, that stinks.
I can only imagine.
But
All
I
right,
can work
well,
with it.
I guess we'll see you guys next month.
Yeah, Mark,
I'd like to
are we gonna
need
have
a motion to end the.
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
second?
Do we have to do that by roll call, Tom?
Yes.
Really? All right. Martha, I. Janet,
Janet, I.
Sam,
Am I?
Pat, Patricia,
Patricia, I.
Tova,
Tova, I.
Jeremy,
Jeremy, I.
and Kevin.
Kevin, and what was the date again on the next meeting?
First.
March 1st.
It's
First,
the
okay,
first Monday of every month.
perfect.
Oh, yeah, and Groundhog Day tomorrow. So I don't know what we're supposed to root for. Either way,
Right.
it's 6 weeks of winter. So.
Have a good
Thank
night.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.